Alright guys, Corey Margera here, and this video is going to be my top favorite movies of the 2010s, the 2010s decade. Now basically, the rule is all the movies on this list have to have came out in the 2010s decade, between 2010 and 2019, you know. So, and of course, the year's not quite over yet. We're not December 31st, 2019 yet. So, I don't think it's completely fair. However, I am going to make this video of all my favorite movies from this decade so far. Now, this decade has been said by a lot of people, including myself, the Future King, and many others, that, this decade hasn't been really that good as far as entertainment goes. But let's see if we can find some decent movies here in this decade that were actually pretty fucking good. I mean, there's got to be something, right? First movie is Batman Under the Red Hood. Now, I've never read the comic book, so I don't know how accurate it is to the source material. However, I can say that this is a fucking badass movie, and it is just great. It basically takes place after, when they tried to kill Jason Todd off in the comics, the Joker killing Jason Todd. And, basically, long story short, there's a new anti hero in Gotham City, who is taking the former mantle of the Joker's old Red Hood gimmick. However, this guy, this Red Hood looks a lot more badass. He's basically cleaning up Gotham. However, he's still a threat to Batman because the way he's doing it isn't exactly up to Batman's morals and standards. So it's basically up to the Dark Knight himself to take on the Red Hood and find out who he really is. Now, this movie is full of great action, great animation, and I mean, it's just a real great direct-to-video movie right here. I mean, I personally enjoyed it a lot. I'm not going to spoil it for you guys if you haven't seen it. Long story short, someone gets thrown into the Lazarus pit by Ra's al Ghul, and it's a pretty cool twist to find out who the Red Hood actually is. Next movie is The Raid Redemption. Now, this movie is one of my favorite, probably my favorite martial arts films of this decade. I mean, this movie is just absolutely fantastic. I mean, the fight choreography is fucking amazing. What's his name? Iko Uwais. I can't pronounce his name. I mean, he's just very talented, very great martial artist. He just does a great role as the main protagonist of this film. There are a lot of great fight scenes. A lot of people really compare this movie to Die Hard. In my opinion, this movie is way better than Die Hard. There's a lot more action, a lot more kick-ass fight scenes. It's just an all around great film. And, it does have a pretty cool twist to the storyline. But I'm not going to spoil it here. If you guys really want to check it out, I definitely recommend it. It is on that good taste list of excellent movies. Next film is Hostel 3, and this is probably my favorite in the entire Hostel trilogy. This one and the first one are my favorite in the series. Hostel 2 sucked. It was a piece of fucking shit. Fuck Hostel 2, it was gay. This movie actually got the series back on track. It's kind of like, the Devil May Cry 3 of the Hostel movies. The first one was great. Second one sucked. The third one was fucking epic. Again, don't want to spoil too much here, but basically it's about these guys who go to Vegas and they find this pretty interesting club and a pretty interesting secret society, and bodies get destroyed, mutilated, a lot of crazy shit. If you're into gore, watch it. Hangover Part 2. Now, I personally, I do think that this film is basically a ripoff of the first movie. However, it is still hilarious. You get Ed Helms, Bradley Cooper, and Zach G. I cannot pronounce his last name to save my life. The original three from the first movie, they're back in this movie. A lot of crazy shit. The Asian guy, I forget his name, he's back in this film. A lot of funny fucking shit in this film. Even though it is basically a sequel ripoff of the first movie, it's still hilarious. It's got a lot of great laughs. just when Ed Helms' character, gets a tattoo on his face. It's, similar to how he lost his tooth in the first movie. If you're into comedies, I definitely recommend it. One of the few good comedies of this decade that really is actually hilarious and truly entertaining, despite the fact that it is a ripoff of the first movie. Resident Evil Damnation. Now, this film is fucking epic. I mean, I can't even describe. Like, this is finally, we get a good Resident Evil movie. Finally! Even Resident Evil Degeneration wasn't that good. Yes, I was glad Claire was in the film, but it was really boring. A lot of it took place in the airport. Not a lot of good action. The CGI was decent, but, it was like, eh. But this film is really good. Leon is the main protagonist in this film. I'm not going to spoil it if you haven't seen it, but if you're a fan of the Resident Evil video games, I definitely recommend it. Basically, Leon is sent to, I think, what was the country in this movie? Russia, or one of those Soviet Union countries. Ada Wong is also in the movie. Don't kill me, guys. I forgot the name of the country, but check it out. If you guys haven't seen it, definitely check it out. The Dark Knight Returns, Part 1 and Part 2. I recommend getting the Blu-ray Deluxe Edition and seeing both films back to back, because this is a really great Batman story right here. I'm a huge Batman fan, and this basically takes place years after Bruce Wayne retires as Batman. Now, unlike in the animated series, there is no Batman Beyond, there is no Terry McGinnis, but this Batman right here is really fucking cool. He shows that he still has it. When he fights the fucking the mutants. I mean, and then when he finally takes on Superman in part 2, and the Joker dies in part 2 as well. I don't want to give too many spoilers. You got to check it out for yourself. It's very accurate to the comic. I did read this comic book after actually watching this movie, and it is very, very accurate. It does take place in the 1980s when Reagan's president, so definitely it's one to check out, especially if you're a Batman fan. The Interview with Seth Rogen and James Franco. Another great comedy from this decade. Again, one of the few great comedies of this decade that I actually enjoyed and, just thought was hilarious. In my opinion, James Franco does steal the show in this movie. Seth Rogen, he has some cool shit to do here, but in my opinion, I think it's not like Pineapple Express, where, both guys, are really funny and do a lot of cool shit. This is more of James Franco's movie. He is the Skylar. He is the interviewer who interviews Kim Jong-un in this movie. Just some really funny stuff. Great shit. Great outrageous shit. If you're a fan of just like outrageous comedies, I definitely recommend it. Fuck Sony though for what they did, but still this movie was worth watching, and I definitely recommend it. Clown. Now this is a really good horror movie right here. Definitely, if you're into horror films, if you're into like gruesome, fucked up movies, this is one of Eli Roth's best movies right here, in my opinion. Definitely shocked me. Didn't really, I was interested in watching it when I first heard about it, but I had no idea how dark and gruesome this movie really was. I mean, this movie was just really, really gruesome. A kid actually gets decapitated in this film. Basically, it's about this father who wants to. The guy who's supposed to perform at his son's birthday party can't show up, so the father decides to dress up and become a clown himself. However, this clown costume is not the one that can easily come off. I'm not going to spoil it for you. If you're into Eli Roth films, if you're into fucked up films, definitely recommend checking this one out, because this one is crazy. And another Eli Roth film that I'm going to put on this list right here is The Green Inferno. Now, this movie right here is just insane. I mean, it's basically, in my opinion, a way better version of Cannibal Holocaust. So if you thought that movie had potential to be a great movie, this is basically that movie. Eli Roth basically made that movie a reality, a way better version of that movie. Kind of like how Resident Evil 7, in my opinion, is a way better version of Silent Hill 2. I don't care what you guys think about that, But getting on to this movie, this bitch, she basically wants to prove herself. She wants to prove that she can, hang out with this protesting group. So she bites off a little more than she can chew when she follows this douchebag into this wild place and crazy things start happening. Watch it. Deadpool. Now, this is probably my favorite comic book film as far as ones that were released in theaters this decade. Deadpool 2 is pretty good as well. However, I prefer this one a lot more. A lot more. And, it just basically goes over the origin story of Wade Wilson, how he got cancer, how he went to the, whatchamacallit, he basically went into this underground facility and, long story short, you know, he was made into quite the experiment. Now he's after revenge on the guy who basically made him this way. If you're not into comic books, I still recommend this movie, especially if you're into like comedy films. This is a really good action comedy right here. Ryan Reynolds does a great job as Deadpool. I definitely recommend it. The Killing Joke, and no, I don't give a shit what anyone says. This movie was awesome. Skip the first 31 minutes of the film, and it's awesome. It's just like the comic book. This was actually one of my favorite Batman comics of all time, The Killing Joke. And I was so glad to finally see that we would get an animated release of this movie. It is fantastic. Yes, again, the first 31 minutes of the movie with Batgirl and the whole Batgirl subplot was pointless. But again, fuck people who bash this movie just for that. Like, just skip the first fucking 31 minutes and get over yourselves, for fuck's sakes. I mean, this movie is just, you should not miss it, especially if you're not a comic book fan. If you want to see a real good Joker origin story done right, I definitely recommend this film right here. All right, so you don't have to go searching for the comic. This is a really good film, great direct-to-video film. And I'm also looking forward to this movie, which is supposed to be coming out later this year. I want to see if it's better than The Killing Joke. Next movie, Resident Evil Vendetta. Now, while it's not as good as Damnation, I did enjoy this movie quite a bit. This movie has action. We get to see Leon team up with Chris. And it's basically kind of like a switch roles of Resident Evil 6. Even though Resident Evil 6, in my opinion, sucked. It's basically a switch of the roles. In Resident Evil 6, Chris was drunk and washed up and depressed and bitter, while Leon was the one fighting and not giving up. In this movie, however, it's the roles are reversed. Leon is the one who's drunk, depressed, pissed off, and Chris and Rebecca are the ones trying to like cheer him up and get him to fight back because he's one of the guys that can actually stop this madness. I'm not going to spoil it for you. Rebecca Chambers also makes her first appearance since Resident Evil 0. If you like Resident Evil, watch it. Enough said. The Strangers Prey at Night. Now, in my opinion, this movie was not as good as the first one. I enjoyed it a lot, but in my opinion, I thought that the 2008 The Strangers film was, in my opinion, much better than this movie. It was a lot more suspenseful. It was a lot more realistic. This, however, comes off as more of your typical slasher movie. However, I enjoyed it a lot. I still recommend watching this film if you're into horror films. Some people might actually prefer it a little more than the first movie because there is more action. But I kind of like the suspense and the tension of the first one better. You actually get to see the strangers interact more. You get to see them outside. It does create for a more creepier atmosphere instead of just being in the house most of the time. But I still prefer the first one. I don't know. It just was a little shocking more. Dragon Ball Super Brawly. Enough said. Best Dragon Ball movie of the decade. Better than Resurrection F. Better than what was the other fucking the Gods movie, the first one. When we get introduced to Beerus and all them. But Battle of the Gods. This, in my opinion, was far superior. They did retcon it a little bit from the original Brawley films of the 90s, but it's still an interesting film. Brawley is more like the Incredible Hulk in this movie than a sinister, evil badass like he was in the first movie. But I still think it has a really good character development. The animation, the fight scenes are fucking awesome. If you're into Dragon Ball, I definitely recommend it. If not, you might want to look elsewhere, but I definitely recommend it. And last but not least, Us. Way, way better than Get Out. I don't care what anyone says. This movie is way better than Get Out. This is so far my favorite Jordan Peele film. It's basically about this family that goes on vacation. Long story short, I'm not gonna spoil it too much, but after they start going back to that beach, after the wife revisits that beach, she starts to have some weird, eerie feelings going back to her childhood, and then all of a sudden, they're basically their doppelgangers appear. The tethered, and long story short, things start getting crazy. I'm not gonna spoil it for you. You have to watch it for yourself. But that, so far, folks, are my favorite movies of the 2010s decade. Hope you enjoyed it.